Hi, welcome to Found with Trish and Sherri, the podcast. After years of swapping stories between ourselves, we're ready to invite you in on the conversation. I'm Sherri, and we have Trish with us today, and Chris. Hi, Chris.
Hey guys, how's it going?
It's going. How are you?
Doing really well, really well. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So Trish and Chris and I all grew up in the same hometown, and we
Right.
talked about that earlier on about how many adopted kids there were in our small town growing up in North Florida.
Especially around our age group, there were a lot.
Yes. And Chris is a little bit younger than we are, I think, our younger friend. And,
Yeah, not too much. Yeah.
Chris is coming in from Colorado to talk with us today and to share his adoption story and his reunion story, which Trish and I got to be a part of, which was very cool. But we haven't talked about this in several years. So,
Right.
So Chris, start us from the beginning. Like, what era were you born, and what do you know of your beginnings?
Oh gosh, wow. So yeah, back in the beginning, really just starting with you guys. You reached out and we had started talking about the idea of finding out who my birth parents were, and it hadn't been a big thing that I'd really thought about, but you guys helped me a lot on that. But growing up, it was always just part of who I was. My parents from the very beginning told me, that I had been adopted. Where I was raised, like you said, in the same town as you guys, in North Florida, and did all the normal things just like everybody else. So had a pretty normal life to, adopt parents that adopted me. I had an older brother and a younger sister. My younger sister was actually adopted as well. My older brother was biological to my parents, and they raised us all, equally, and had a pretty much from any perspective, a great childhood and great, growing up and all of that.
So, was there a reason why brother was not adopted and you and your sister were? Do you know that?
I don't know. That's a great question. Honestly, both my parents have passed, and that's probably something I would love to ask them at this point. But it really never came up. And even speaking with my wife, we're like, has we ever even talked about that? No one really knows. So I don't know if there was some reason that they couldn't have more children, or if they just wanted to adopt children, or what it was. But that they never really was mentioned.
I have to say, because our parents were very close friends, my parents and Chris's parents.
Right.
And I think of all the adults that I grew up with, your parents both were the sweetest people, the most loving, sweetest, there for a hug, just kind, loving people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. And is genuinely, that's true. And I feel like I look back on my parents, like I said, unfortunately they both passed, but just really great memories with them. And they genuinely were just really kind people all the way through. And I think that showed in public and in private.
So what did they tell you growing up about your adoption? What are your first memories?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, they always said, hey, you were adopted from birth. We got you. We were grew up down in West Palm Beach, Florida, which is where I was born. And then a few years, as a young child, we moved up to North Florida, where you guys were and everything. But they said, hey, we adopted you down there. It was from birth scenario type of thing, and really didn't try to make a big deal of it, but they also didn't try to hide it. So it was just kind of a straightforward thing. I do remember, like, as I got older, my mom sitting down with me saying, like, hey, we do have some documentation about your adoption. If you are ever interested or want to know about that, let us know, and we're happy to share that with you and help you in any way if you want to have more information. And so I had actually never did, do that. But I found out later, like as my sister got older, that she had asked my parents about that, and they had helped her to some extent. I don't think she got as far as I got, but that was something that they were open to do, and they were open to helping us with, but it just didn't really come up that much.
Since you were both
Right.
adopted, did you talk to each other a lot, or were you kind of supportive of each other as being both adopted, or did it not come up?
Yeah, honestly, it really did not come up that much. I think maybe it's because my parents were just so open from the beginning, telling us and sharing with us that it really didn't come up. From my understanding, my sister was a few years younger than me. Like after I went to college and kind of got married and different things like that, I think that there was a period where she like had a lot of questions and things, but I wasn't around during that time so as much, and so I didn't really have that much time to talk to her about it. But that other than that, that's it just kind of, for me, from my perspective, it was not that big of an issue growing up or anything that we really dwelt on.
What made you finally pull the trigger to
Yeah, spit it out, Trish.
trying?
Yeah.
What made you want to go ahead and do it? And
yeah.
What made you make that final decision to go ahead? Yeah, I'm going to look.
That's a great question. It's kind of several things happened. So of course I had been in touch with Sherri a little bit, and she had told me about her efforts. And so I'd heard about that. And then my daughter had actually mentioned to me several times, hey, do you ever want to find out? Could we find out like who your parents were, biological, for medical information and things like that? And so she had mentioned it. And then it kind of came to one moment where after my mom passed away, were going through some of her belongings, and I actually found that paperwork that she had mentioned in her belongings, and she had saved it in this important documents type of folder. And I just remember sitting down with my wife and kind of looking through it, and it had a little bit, I know you guys mentioned the name of the sheet, but it's like a little sheet that just says just some little basic information about who your biological father was and things like that.
Non-identifying information.
Yeah. So I found that paperwork and a couple of other things. And since all of those things had kind of come together at that stage, I was like, yeah, I want to reach back out to Sherri and Trish, both of you guys, and find out like what would it be like, what was the next process, and how would it work to actually find out that information.
Right. And like I said, it's been a minute. Wasn't there something like you had already done a 23andMe, but not an Ancestry, or there was something like that?
I think, we had started with 23andMe. So my daughter and I both did it, and just to see like the genetic information and stuff like that, we were kind of curious about that. So we had started with that test, and we're kind of waiting on the results. All of this happened around the same time. But we did 23andMe first, and then after talking to you guys, I went ahead and did Ancestry as well, and got my information in both of the databases.
Okay. And so your closest match on Ancestry was who?
So the first match that I got was actually on the 23andMe, and it was a biological cousin. There were several like cousins there, and it was from that, kind of the first thing, and we can talk about that one. And then on the Ancestry side, actually my biological mother was on ancestry.com, and I was able to connect directly with her on that. So from both of those I got hits. And it's interesting because if I would have only done one, I wouldn't have got the other, and that kind of thing. So I got both sides of my family instantly from those. The 23andMe is my father's side, and Ancestry is my mother's side.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I remember correctly, you contacted or reached out, or the cousin on your father's side got to you first. How did that happen?
Yes. So the very first contact I had was through the 23andMe, and it was my biological cousin on my father's side. He actually reached out to me. So he saw that, I guess you get the notifications on 23andMe, and he saw that. And so he reached out and said, hey, who are you? Well, like, why did you, I see that you're my cousin, but I know all my cousins. So, who are you? Tell me your story. And so I reached out to him back, and, we started talking and found out he actually lives in Colorado, not too far from me. And we were actually my wife and I were able to connect with him pretty quickly, and had dinner and met his family and kind of started talking and getting my backstory on my father's side.
Which is wild because you're from Florida.
Right,
And,
right.
like, you moved around. You were in California for a while, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Since high school, I've moved quite a bit, and we've lived in Virginia and California as well, and are now, live in Colorado. And so here this guy is, he's in Colorado, and come to find out, they're all from Iowa. So apparently, and even though I was born in Florida, both my biological father and mother were from Iowa. And that's kind of where that all, hub is.
Right. So take us from there. Just take us through the story, just like it happened to you.
Sure. So yeah, after speaking to my cousin, kind of telling him my backstory, getting to know him a little bit, he got to know us. He was like, "Hey, I will, there's only my father, and he has two uncles and a father, and those are the three boys." And he goes, "You have to be, related to one of them. So I'm going to find out who it is." So he offered basically, he goes, "I'm going to call, my parents and, relatives. I'll try to find out who it is." And within just a, very short time, he came back to me and said, "Hey, it's my uncle." And I talked to him, and he told me the story. He goes, "Would you like to meet him?" And so I was like, "Yeah, sure." And so, he set it up. His uncle came into town. He doesn't live in Colorado, but he came into town, and we all met at my cousin's house, and we all spoke and kind of got to know each other. And I heard the whole story from his perspective, like, where I came from. So
Okay.
that was the first kind of big breakthrough on finding out, what my story was and all of that.
So what is the story of how you came to be?
So apparently he and my biological mother were, had met each other in college. And through that, I was born, except they they weren't like dating or whatever, but they split apart, and he was actually graduating. So he left and went overseas to do some work. And then she, I'm assuming, went down to Florida, and that's where, I was born. So when she became pregnant or whatever, that was the scenario that kind of played out. And then they both had, their separate lives. He went on to be married and has two children, a boy and a girl. And then she also has, was married and has two daughters. So yeah, the whole kind of heard the whole backstory. And since they were both from the same town in Iowa, it was like really easy. Like everyone knew all the information, and it all kind of came out really quickly and easily.
So you weren't a secret.
Well, I don't know that they had been shared. Of course they didn't share it. Like the cousin had no idea about this.
Right.
But of course, the biological father knew the whole scenario, what happened, and, what happened to the mother and all of that, because just of knowing, what happens to people, that you live around.
In a small town.
In a small town, exactly.
We know small town well.
Yeah.
So your biological father did know that you existed, and they had agreed to put you up for adoption. And
yes,
as Trish and I have talked, back in that time period, that was pretty typical. And they told people just to go on with your lives. They never dreamt that in the future there would be these, get it through Amazon or over, wherever
right.
these kits, and that we would find them.
Yeah, and it was interesting because exactly we talked to you and I and Trish. We all talked about that a lot before the meeting happened, and so, I wanted to be patient with them and kind of just allow them to open up and tell the story from their perspective. But it is, they, both of them said that, they wondered like what happened to me and that kind of thing. And come to find out, I think my mother had started the process at some point to try to find out or locate me, that type of thing. So there was some curiosity, and they were happy to know, that I turned out fine and all of that kind of stuff. And then we spent a good portion of time in that first meeting, just kind of finding out like, hey, what are your physical traits and characteristics, and what are mine, and kind of seeing those comparisons. What was he good at in school and that kind of thing, which was really fun to do, and kind of hearing, for the first time, his story as well, and how his life had turned out.
What were some of the similarities between the two of you?
So he was like really good in math, and I was always really good in math. And he had won some kind of contest, I think, in his growing up. He's also had traveled internationally, which my work, I traveled internationally quite a bit for the last 20 years in my work and that type of thing. And then he was turned out to be like a college professor and had done a lot of, studying and that kind of thing, which I'm also interested in. And so there were just a lot of similarities and things like that, things that I just kind of naturally gravitate to, that he also, had those affinities. And so that was really interesting to find out. We talked about that, the nature versus nurture aspect of it, and what that meant. And so, yeah, very interesting.
Now, wasn't there a connection in similarities with your daughter Sarah and your biological father? Farming? Was it farming and
yeah. So
organics
he is that's his business is, I think they took over like his parents' farm or something like that. And so he's into like organic farming right now. And so my daughter was really interested to hear about that. And so we actually set up a second meeting after the first one, where he was able to meet Sarah directly, and my wife again was there, and we met at a coffee shop up in Fort Collins, and got to know him a little bit better, and speak with Sarah about that as well. So yeah, that was her first kind of chance to get involved with this since it happened. And she did have questions, and so she was excited to come and be a part of that.
Have you maintained a relationship with your dad, your birth father?
No, not really. And that's something, I mean, I guess neither one of us have really like pushed it very hard. I think we texted a few times at the beginning. I also stayed in touch with my cousin, and, stayed kind of connected with him a little bit. But I went through this thing where my wife and I have been traveling for the last few years and stuff, and we just really haven't continued it. And for me, this is part of what I worked through when talking with you guys, was I was interested in the story. I definitely wanted it, but I didn't necessarily need like a relationship, or I wasn't like longing for, I just need to have that family together or anything like that. I kind of felt like I have a family, and that was my connection. So this was more just to get that story and information. And of course, I'm open to that connection, but for now, it just hasn't been a ton.
Right. And Trish and I have talked extensively, and a lot of the book that we wrote deals with the difficulty of making up that history, or, making a relationship with people who are biologically like us, but, when you come in, they're just strangers,
right?
And making those routines and when to talk. And a lot of that is really tricky, or it has been for me. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can see that.
Mm-hmm. So now, go ahead, Trish.
And what about, how did you find your mother's side?
Okay, yeah. So that was through the ancestry.com. And so I'd already I believe we were already kind of down the path with the biological father. And my wife and I were actually on our anniversary trip. and spending some time in Key
We were in
West.
Key West. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like a great trip and everything. And in the middle of all of that, I received an email from her. So when I initially saw that connection on Ancestry, I sent a message through Ancestry, just reaching out to her. But I didn't hear anything back initially. And so it was, some period of time. And I was on that anniversary trip when she actually sent me an email. And it was a long email describing, kind of this situation. Now, she didn't necessarily want to meet me or talk to me. I'm not sure emotionally or whatever the reasons, but she wanted to send a letter, and it was a very kind letter, and it was, very explanatory of the situation and things like that. And she did mention that she had, tried to find me in the past and things like that. But anyway, she spelled all that out in a letter, which was very nice. And then shortly after, her oldest daughter, reached out to me, and I got to do like a Zoom call with her and my wife, and we just kind of got to know more about their family and got to know more through her in that process. So she was very interested, and I'm not sure 100% why, but the mother was like a little bit hesitant. So that's kind of how it played out on the mother side.
How'd that make you feel?
It was interesting because, I did feel like, we talked about my parents before and how, just good people they are and that type of thing. And seeing just kind of like the hesitancy there, it was a little bit weird, to experience that. Like, what has she got to be afraid of? I mean, so I don't know. I didn't really understand why she didn't want to do that, but it was, kind of helped solidify feelings about the whole situation, and just saying like, okay, these are not my parents that raised me. These are my biological parents, and I can only have so much expectation of what they, want to be a part of or what they want to know about.
Right. Trish and I interviewed my biological mother a couple of days ago, and it's been 8 years since we found each other, since we were reunited. And she cried a large majority of the interview. She cried, and I'm 56. I found her when I was 48. It's been 8 years since we found each other, and it's still very, very, very sensitive. She was
Probably
surprised at how we cried. Yeah. Yes. So I can only imagine. Well, and like when we first met, I assumed she was going to be so excited to see my baby pictures because she had never seen me when I was born. And she was like, absolutely not. I can't handle it. So
yeah.
Mine never asked.
Yeah, I guess it's so, I can only imagine that it's so much for them to unpack. And so the fact that, they engage, they give us the story and that kind of thing, I'm thankful for that. And so at least, I got that. And then I really did not have super high expectations about anything beyond that. So the idea that, I got the story, I got to know who they were, a little bit about them and stuff like that, I'm very thankful. But yeah, I can only imagine, what they emotionally have been going through and stuff like that. So, I mean, you guys, we're all on the adopted side of it, and those guys are on, a different side of it. And so,
right.
Maybe they need to have their own podcast about that part.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so this podcast that we're doing is for all sides of DNA.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm excited to get some of those other people in this. Yes. That's going to be kind of tricky to do, considering.
So I would imagine, since this has happened and since you guys released the book, which has been great, by the way, I've shared it with several people. I come across more people that are adopting. So, it's still popular to adopt, and a lot of people are adopting internationally and things like that. And so in my network, I have about 3 or 4 people specifically that have adopted children. And so when I tell them that I was adopted and I've shared like your book with them and stuff like that, they are like really eager to find out more information and how do you feel about it and that kind of thing, from that perspective. But I guess it's more of a hidden thing, and you don't really come across people that say, I gave up my kid for adoption, so those people are probably the harder ones to find.
Right.
They're not going to, be easy to talk to, but people that are adopting, those of us that have been adopted, I feel like are a little bit more eager to talk and share our stories. It doesn't have all the same implications that it would for those, on that other side.
The stigma.
Right.
But we share, it seems like a common thread that the adopted parents tell the child, your mother was a young teenager and she couldn't take care of you, so she gave you to us so that we can provide everything for you. And I'm reading a book called The Girls That Went Away, which tells it from pre-Roe v. Wade what those stories were, and they didn't have the choices. And when my biological mother came on, she said her mother, my maternal grandmother, had 5 children at home and was a single mother, and there were no resources, and there was no question, and she couldn't keep me if she wanted to. So it's not always they wanted the best. I mean, they did want the best for us, but it's not like they chose to give us up either,
Did you find the information on that you were given was correct or incorrect or somewhere in between?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that. You're talking about the sheets that I found from, in my mom's documents. I think there was probably, I think there were some mistakes in that.
Yeah, my mom's side was pretty good because I assume they got the information directly from her. But my father's side was at least 50%, if not more, completely off. And it really kind of got in the way, and sometimes of us being able to search because we thought he was an only child. We thought his parents were teachers, etc. And it just made a big difference. But there were things like he was a star athlete. No, he wasn't. He was just as clumsy as me. And it kind of, changed how I thought about myself. And I didn't feel so guilty that I'd let my parents down.
Yeah.
Did you have any of that where it was different or things weren't quite what they said?
Right. No, I think there were some inaccuracies in it, but nothing, significantly major. And because I got the story kind of so quickly, I didn't really dwell on that. And it was just able to kind of like, okay, this is the reality of it and that kind of thing. It is interesting that I do have like, half sisters and brothers and stuff like that out there, and these cousins and that kind of thing. That's really interesting. And, maybe down the line, there'll be opportunity to, get to know them better, that type of thing. But, it's just cool to have kind of the background, and I never had really dwelled on it or thought about it too much, but now that I have it, it's just really cool to be able to share that. And, when people ask me before, hey, like, why were you adopted or whatever, I didn't know. I said, I don't know. I don't know any information. But now that they, when people ask me, I can actually tell my story a little bit better. And I like that. I like being able to do that for sure.
Did you get any medical information that was interesting to you?
Yeah. So on both sides, they were very quick to share, health information and stuff like that. Fortunately, there weren't really any issues to, red flags to speak of that really stood out. But they shared, the health data and that kind of things for them, which, there's always lifestyle and genetics and that kind of thing. But it was great to have that information for sure, that there wasn't like a huge history of anything that I was concerned about, in there to be worried about.
We found when there's like 4 generations of diabetes, you kind of look at it a little more seriously once you find it out.
Exactly.
Like, okay, well, 6 people in my immediate family say had cancer. Well, you bet you're going to be looking at it a lot differently than if it were one of 1,000 things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you feel so growing up adopted? I'm pretty sure psychologically the reason why I got married so young to my first husband and had children was because I had this longing to be genetically like somebody. So when I called them my four, when I had my four kids, for the longest time, they were the only people I was DNA, like biologically connected to in the world. And I would say that to them. What was it like for you to become a parent after being, you know, just just Chris who was adopted? I mean, not connected to anybody.
Yeah, that's it. That's a good question. So you guys know my brother, and he's like super tall and all of that. And so I was always shorter. And so there was a huge difference. And plus he has like dark hair. My dad had my adopted dad, he has dark hair. And so I think they had those similarities. However, I actually have a lot of like physical characteristics of my mother.
Mm-hmm.
So like we both had like kind of red hair and that kind of thing. So I always felt a little bit connected to my mom, even though we weren't,
Right.
biologically connected. So there was that sense for whatever reason, that I feel like that. And so I didn't like feel like super disconnected from my family in any way.
Mm-hmm.
However, it is really cool, going through this experience. And, when my daughter was born, she was the first, and she came out and had so many physical attributes that I have, and so many personality traits that I have and stuff. And having, my wife, as the daughter grows, my wife saying like, oh, isn't this like you and this like me and things like that, being able to do that, that was really fun. And it's a great part of being a parent, that I really enjoyed. And I guess I probably did take a little bit more joy in it than maybe others because of that reason, that like, hey, this is literally the first person I know well that's biologically, related to me. So
Right.
I would say that probably played part of the role in that for sure.
Right. Right. What's been the most rewarding and the most challenging aspects for you?
Of this whole journey.
Yeah.
So the most rewarding. So the most rewarding was the just kind of getting the story. I mean, that to me, and you guys really helped me with that, understanding how important it is to know your story. And so that really helped me. It really did just fill in kind of a missing piece that I didn't have before. And not that I had been like, oh man, I need to have it. But once I got it, I was like, wow, that was cool to find out. And it is really nice to know. So that was definitely the most rewarding part. And, physically speaking to people and kind of getting to know them and stuff like that as part of that process was really fun. The most challenging part is, I think, I had the benefit of, I've lived with this my whole life. And so I've been, thought about it and that kind of thing throughout my life. And then you guys took the time to kind of really help me talk through the process and what it would be like and how to not get your expectations too high and things like that. However, my daughter, she, was interested in this, but she didn't have any of that preparation. It was just kind of a thing like, hey, I want to know, and I would love to meet these people, and I want to have like relationship with them. And so she was a little bit disappointed when she didn't get the chance to really have a strong relationship. I think she was in college when it happened, and she kind of had the assumption that, oh, when we meet these people, we're going to be close with them. And,
Right.
that kind of a thing. And that didn't happen. And so I feel like she was disappointed through that. And so that was challenging because we had to talk to her about that and kind of why you shouldn't get, your hopes up too much on that. And you need to have realistic expectations on all sides about it. So that was the most challenging part. And, we haven't really talked about it recently, but I definitely would love to check in with her and kind of see like how she's processing it, after this period of time. I mean, because it's been quite a while now.
We
How
really
long
found
has it been?
Gosh, it's been several years. Probably has it been 4 or 5 years now, right? And
I would have guessed 5, but I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. Say 5 years. And so now, since then she's graduated from college and now she's married
Mhm.
and all of that. And so, yeah, I should talk to her about it and bring it up. And again, now that she's a little bit later on in life and that kind of thing.
It's
But one
funny
thing-
how you kind of forget. I'm sorry, Trish.
That's okay. So one thing that Sherri and I have said through this entire thing, that throughout our lives and throughout this whole process, it was particularly important to have somebody that you could talk to about it. And just, even if it wasn't super anything really big, or from the details to the big emotions, everything, having somebody else to bounce it off of was really, really important. And it sounds like you're saying it was really helpful to have somebody to talk to as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for me, you guys have filled that role because you talked about it with me and kind of helped me, guided me through the process and stuff. And then you encouraged me early on to really bring Lynn, my wife, in and kind of get her involved. And she doesn't have really any experience with this, from her family background too much. So she hadn't really taken much time to think about it. And so I can talk to her about it at one level. I can talk to you guys about it at another level. And then, talking to my daughter is a whole nother level. So I am happy that I've had the opportunity to kind of share with different people and talk to them about it for sure. And I have felt also additionally, these people, these friends of mine that have adopted kids, I've had a great time talking to them about it as well, and kind of hearing their story and then sharing my story. And, as kind of on that level as well has been good. So there's been a lot of opportunities since this happened to share with people and kind of talk about it. And all of that, I think, has been really helpful and enjoyable for me.
Would
Yeah.
you search again?
Ask me again.
Would you search again? Would you
I
do
think
it
I would. Yeah, I would do it because for the most part, I want to get that. I would, number one, want to get that story and find that out. And that's been really helpful for me and able to share more with others as a result of that. So, yeah, I think I would do that for sure.
If you were speaking to an adoptee who was considering searching for their biological family, what advice would you give them?
So I took up so many notes when I was first talking to you guys about it, and really I'd never thought about what is your biological parent thinking, and what are the difficulties you might encounter, and what are the situations you could go into. And I initially, kind of one of the reasons I probably never wanted to go and find out my parents is I was afraid it would be something bad. And I was like, everything is pretty good in my life. And I was scared a little bit, like, hey, what if I reach out and I find out these people and it's really a horrible situation and it becomes some kind of complicated nightmare.
Right.
I was worried about that to a large degree. And so that was my biggest hesitancy. So talking to people that want to do it, I would say, like, hey, take a pause, talk this through, find out some of the realities. It might not be great. It could be great. It could take a long time. You might not ever get the story. I mean, there's so many ways this thing could go. And you guys did a great job of preparing me beforehand. Like, hey, think about this. It could go a lot of different ways. And you both shared your stories with me as well. So that I feel like was the most helpful aspect
Right.
by far. And
Right.
I would want, I would say, hey, you guys need to read Sherri and Trish's book and think about it and that kind of stuff. That's the kind of advice I would want to give, is just set your expectations realistic and be careful.
Right. Yeah. Honestly, Trish and I found all 4 of our biological parents, and it was 4 different stories, 4 different situations, 4 different levels of processing, for us.
Right.
many
And
different
you did too. Yes. I don't think we have spoken with anybody who found their biological families as easily as you did.
Oh, really?
No,
Yeah.
no.
It happens so
My sister
fast. Yeah.
maybe. My
Yeah.
sister, maybe, because she put in her DNA, and it was I don't think I've talked to you since then, Chris.
No, I don't think Chris even knows.
Oh, it was a few years ago, and all of a sudden I was on the other side of who is this person and what do they want, and I was like, oh, this is what it's like to be on the other side and going, oh, this is interesting. And we found her she was half a country away, and I'm like, I don't know how this is gonna fit, but we eventually figured it out. And once I saw pictures of her and she saw pictures of me, oh, it was obvious. We were definitely related. And I got to meet her last Christmas, her and her family, and they were just wonderful. And one of their kids looks literally like I look on the back of the book. It was just so odd to all of a sudden.
That's funny.
I mean, I look a lot like both of my parents. I really do. But it was so weird to also see that continue in the next generation. It gave me a real feeling of that kind of biological continuation of that you don't quite get the same as, especially when you don't really look like your parents. I think that's a big difference because, both my parents were dark haired and tan and all that. And I did not have those characteristics.
Right. Oh,
I happen to have looked a lot like my parents.
Yeah. So is there anything you can think of about this that you haven't told us that you would be interested in either us or other people knowing?
I don't know. I don't think so. You guys let me know what I might have left out, but I guess I want to back up to what we were talking about, that process of when you guys, I just remember that call with you guys and kind of hearing both your stories and talking about what could possibly happen and how the DNA works and how you can find out and stuff like that. And it was just really that was really a nice time. I remember that and it just gave me a lot of good feelings, thinking that you guys, are on my side through this. And if something came up and I had questions or anything like that, I could go to you and talk about it. And we talked about from the beginning how, my wife, she's very supportive and all of that stuff. And I have a great relationship with her, but because she doesn't necessarily have this in her background, she's not going to be able to really talk this through with me as well as somebody that does. And so it was just nice to know, like, hey, I've got these two people that I know, that I trust, that I can talk to about this, and they have been through it and they can give me advice. And so I think, like, when I got that email from my biological mom, I immediately reached out to you guys to let you know. And when I got that message from my cousin, I immediately reached out and let you guys know, like, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what I'm thinking. What do you guys think? And that kind of thing. That was really, really helpful. And I think I'm so thankful to you guys for helping me through this process and kind of getting through it together and all that. And I'm glad you guys wrote it all down and created a book and all of that stuff and told your stories. It's great.
Yeah, we keep saying we need to go back and reread it. It's been a minute.
And update it because we've had so many things happen.
Oh, man.
Just the 5 years after, but things continue. I mean, people have popped out of the woodwork. Things have changed, and it's relationships, some of them really got built and some didn't. And I have found it very interesting to see that long term, because I haven't seen a whole lot of really long term stories about how this kind of plays out in the long run. I know my daughter had not always been interested in looking. And when she was younger, when we were doing this, she was like, oh, you're adopted. Aunt Sherri's adopted. Who else is adopted? And when are we going to look for my birth parents? And I said, well, considering, what could happen when you're an adult, we'll be more than happy to do it with you.
Right.
So I think that being older and having done it also was a lot easier than having been super young and running into it. I would have felt a lot more rejected or changed who I thought about myself. Do you kind of feel that way too, that being older made it a little bit easier than if you'd have been younger?
100%. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think, at this age, especially, like, I had kids, I had, experienced life. I've already done so many things. And the idea of, like, okay, I mean, it wasn't like so much of my world hinging on it if something
Right.
goes wrong or whatever like that. So I would agree, like, being older and being, able to deal with things more maturely, or, emotional regulation and all of that stuff helps us in that situation by far. And I could see, things could go, with my daughter. She was in her early 20s, and emotionally it was a lot more difficult for her. And it wasn't even her, situation so much as it was mine. But I could see that for sure.
Yeah. And how was your son through all of this?
Really not worried about it at
Right.
all.
Yeah. That,
Yeah.
that's really interesting because
Yeah.
my three sons were in their 20s and teenagers. And like once they got that ancestry result that we're German, Irish, Scottish, they were done. They were
Yeah.
happy with that. They were okay.
Yeah.
And honestly, my students at school were really involved in the search and the DNA kit. And then they were fine too. My husband, Trish, and I have talked about it. Like you said, our husbands were supportive, but didn't really have a lot of skin in the game. Like it's hard to explain to people who haven't been through this what your emotions are, and I come across as a very strong, confident, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, my entire life, I've had a great sense of abandonment. And I mean, like, I call it head knowledge and heart knowledge. Head knowledge, like I had the best parents, I had the best life, I had everything. I was loved, I was accepted, but my heart, I felt abandoned. And that changed when I found my birth mother. Literally, I was 48, and like this world opened up, and I was not scared to do anything. And I just started knocking off my bucket list, and just
Wow.
it's really wild, really wild.
Wow. Yeah. And I don't, from the guy perspective of my son or whatever, it was so fascinating because he was actually living here. He was still in college and he was living at home when all of this was going down. And I was like, hey, these guys that I'm biologically related to are going to come over. He's like, do I have to be there? And he wasn't really worried about it.
Yeah.
You're going to be the me kisser.
Yeah. So he's like, okay. Yeah.
And
anyways.
I've kind of wondered because we interviewed my friend Sam the other day as well. And the male perspective of searching and finding is a little bit different than the female perspective. And I hear some of that playing out through your daughter.
Yeah. And then we did find out later that, my wife's brother, he was adopted. He didn't know who his biological father was, but he found him and was able to talk to him and actually has somewhat of a small relationship with the person. And so we were able to share a little bit about that as well and kind of find out. But he as well, it hasn't been, he is not the kind of person that is going to really open up a ton about it, but he did share, hey, I was able to meet him and this and that, and some of the positives that came out of it, that he was happy to have. So, yeah.
Right. That's interesting. And I think the craziest part to me was when Trish and I went into this, my mind was thinking about it as only adoption related DNA reunions. And how many stories like what you just told, Trish's sister finding her, my husband's sister found us after the book was written. Actually, she's in the end of the book, isn't she, Trish?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have an interview with her. But they weren't necessarily adoption stories, but they're very similar.
Yeah, I guess it's got the same dynamics and they're just a little bit different, but right, there's so many implications. And that's one thing you guys brought up is that like, this DNA technology is new. No one had expected it before. And now it's unlocking all of these doors for people and this information.
No secrets.
Right.
Yeah.
We always say if we can find a second cousin, all you have to have is a second cousin.
Yeah, you're in, huh?
And put their DNA in, and you can be found.
We go into stalker mode.
Not so much anymore.
No.
Are you guys working with anyone right now? Like, are you working with people and helping them, like kind of like you did with me as well?
There's not anybody actively going right now because I think once the book got written, we kind of simmered down. But we're hoping to get some of the the Facebook, the DNA detectives and search angels on. I would love to have them on and have them share their stories. And we did have Sam on the other day, and he was interested now in searching for his dad. But now that's only 2 days old. So I sent him the names of the 2 Facebook groups, and I'm assuming to hear back from him. I think he's going to search. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. But I think with the podcast, it's probably going to start back up.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad you guys are doing it. And then, Trish, I know you actually adopted
Yes.
a child, and, we talked about that a little bit as well, at the very beginning. And I think that's more of, I'm meeting so many people. I know so many people that have adopted children and stuff like that. So I think that it's a really fascinating topic. And for those of us that have kind of been on any aspect of it, it's really interesting.
Right. Well, it's interesting just looking at our 3 faces. Trish was adopted and then she adopted, but they're both only children. And Chris, you and I were adopted in the families that had a biological child, and then 2 siblings were adopted. And it just, it goes on and on and on. My biological mom adopted 3 kids out of foster care, and her son that was born after me was adopted by her second husband.
Wow.
I mean, it just goes on and on,
Well, the one I think I can take from all that is that I have definitely learned that family is partially DNA in some respects, but really what a family is the people you love. Yeah. And the people that you share your life with, that's who becomes family, or in our case with some people, friends that become family. And that's really the important thing that I hang on to a lot of the time, that while it was really great to meet a lot of these people, some I talked to once and never talked to again. There just wasn't, once we exchanged information, there just wasn't a whole lot there. But I've also gotten some really great relationships. My cousin Mark and I have gotten to really know each other and do things together. And he's become Uncle Mark to my daughter. And my birth mother I get to talk to a few times a year, which is wonderful. My sister and I are getting to know each other better and hope we get to see each other again at Christmas. So it's been really nice. But again, fraught with some drama as well. But, it is, it's in life, everything is not always all good or all bad.
Right.
Who would have, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So say, is there anything else you can think of that you would like to tell us? Because we're getting
on time.
No, this is good. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me on, and I'm happy to share my story. And
thank you.
Hopefully it's encouraging to others that are maybe on some stage of this journey themselves. And, like you said, maybe I hope they don't get their hopes up, because my situation went really easily and quickly, but, it is possible. And, it was great to get the information and find it out. So thank you guys so much.
No problem.
And I was looking at our faces thinking, who would have guessed decades ago that this is where we'd be sitting and chatting, and that this is our own little family. So
that's right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Chris.
you guys have to come visit me in Colorado sometime, and I would love to catch up.
Well, it looks like one of my kids is moving out your way, so maybe I'll take you up on that soon.
Okay. That sounds great. Yeah, let me know more about that.
All right.
Okay,
We'll talk
so
to you soon, Chris.
yep.
All
Thank
right.
you, Chris. If you have a related story you'd like to share, please send us an email at foundwithtrishandsherri@gmail.com, and you could be part of an upcoming episode. If you'd like to know more about the story that inspired this podcast, check out our book, Found: Adopted Friends Search for Their Birth Families, available on Amazon. You can also find us on all the places: Spotify, Apple Music, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. So until next time, this is Trish and Sherri. Thank you for joining us.